Hey, welcome to Trucks. You know, a while back I introduced a project called Sergeant Rock involving a certain 1941 Dodge Power Wagon. Now this is a very unique project in a lot of ways, but the main purpose of it is to answer some of the questions that I get from you viewers on a project that you're working on, or something you'd like to be working on, or something you've just always wanted to know, and to show you how to do stuff that you won't necessarily see on another show or in a magazine. The first step was to show what's involved in reviving an old vehicle. I'm talking about something that has sat neglected for years that most people would think is just a piece of junk, like this old 41 Dodge. Okay, what I've got here is a 1941 Dodge Army truck that has been sitting in a field for years and hasn't run in who knows how long. And I literally pulled it right out of the field and brought it into the shop, so it's completely untouched. As you can see, it's still got weeds on it and old tire chains on the tires and a custom-made bed. And check this out. You got an old blanket covering the seat springs, and that's all covered with rat crap. Is this cool or what? Oh yeah, look at this. Man, I almost expect a chicken to come flying out of here. But a gearhead doesn't see junk. No, man, they see potential. So I wanted to show how to turn that potential into a running vehicle in just a few hours and a little bit of money. First, we covered how to make sure the engine's not locked up. And if it is locked up, how to get it unlocked without destroying it. Now, if the motor is blown or if you've got mechanical damage like a rod sticking out the side or something, you might as well just pull the motor out and rebuild it because you're not going to get it to run. So, finding out if the engine is free and turns over is the first step. Now, if your engine is locked up, don't give up, not yet. What usually happens is a little bit of condensation gets into the cylinders, causes a little bit of rust around the piston rings and the cylinder, and holds them together. And you can break that loose. And this is how to do it. Take some good penetrating lube, pop out your spark plugs, and give a good blast of lube down into those cylinders and let it set. Then you can usually break it loose, taking a wrench, putting it down on the crank bolt, and turning it. Now, our motor, as you can see, turns over well, so we are ready to go to the next step. Next was the fuel system, starting with the biggest problem area on a neglected vehicle, the carburetor. The float bowl will either be filled with old rancid gas and sludge or the dried powdery residue of it. So after disassembling the carburetor, we'll completely clean it with solvent, blow out the ports with air to clear any clogs, and then reassemble it using the parts and gaskets from the rebuild kit. Finally, reinstall it on the engine. After that, I cleaned up the rest of the fuel system to prepare it for fresh gas. Then I brought the electrical system back to life in the form of points and plugs and, you know, typical tune-up things. Oh boy. Now you can try to clean these up and re-gap them and reuse them, but you are still messing with an old spark plug that may not be any good anyway, and you're gonna find that out when you try to start that engine. No, new plugs are so cheap, it is not worth a hassle trying to restore one of these. So, just replace them, and then you know what you got. Well, you still have some ignition pieces to replace, and they are all under the distributor cap, in the form of points and condenser and rotor, and of course a new cap. Now, the most important thing here is that you need to know what your point gap is. Now, you can get that at an auto parts store or a service manual. But that wasn't all. I also covered fixing and correcting butchered and hacked up wiring that can turn your project into a flaming pile if not corrected. Now is the time to fix this kind of stuff, because if you don't, when you turn that key, you could put a whole new meaning to the term, fire it up. Now, most old vehicles have an old junk battery in them, so obviously that'll need to be replaced. In this case, it's 6 volt. But another thing you need to look at are your cables and your ends. Now, these get corroded over time and can give you a bad connection, even though they may still look good on the outside. So, if there's even a question that these might be bad, you need to replace them. Finally, I replaced all those nasty fluids and started that sucker up. Here we go. This is awesome! And drove it out of the shop, just like it rolled out of the field. Look at this, no power steering, no brakes, no floor, but it's running under its own power, and that is what trucks is all about. This is great. Welcome back to Trucks and our update of the Sergeant Rock project, which is lurking back there in the shadows. But before I show you where I'm going to take it next, I need to finish showing you where we've been. So, after showing you how to deal with an old engine, the next thing I wanted to do also dealt with a lot of questions that I get. How do you hand fabricate body panels when there's nothing available? This also gave me a chance to show you what kind of tools are available to help you do this yourself. First, I dealt with common problem areas like dog legs and door seals and windshield corners. Now that would be the area around the windshield, or around the lip of the fender, or up under the cab or the rocker, or even into the door jambs. Now the reason that these are so bad is that each one of these areas create a little shelf that can hold water, moisture, whatever, and that of course will cause rust. So I'm going to show you how to make a replacement panel for these areas. Now we're going to move on to a tool called the Shrinker Stretcher. Now this will actually shrink or stretch the metal so you can form it to the exact contour that you're looking for. Oh, look at that. A perfect replacement panel. Then it was time to clear out that nasty interior and the years of rat crap so I could get to the floors. Oh, that's nasty. Have a seat, Mo. Yeah, it was some raunchy stuff. Oh, man. There's some stink happening in there. Whoa. All right. Now that the nasty stuff is done, we can move on to the floors. Now, you may remember that our old 41 Dodge has no floor. Finally, I could start building a new floor. Now, an important thing to remember, anytime you are doing patch panel work, you need to make it fit your application. Don't expect it just to drop into place. Now, I'll be prepared to do a little bit of hammering, a little bit of twisting, a little bit of bending to get everything to fit right. Because it is this step here, all this pre-fitting, that's going to decide just how nice all this is going to go together. Look at that. With the perimeter frame done, it was time to build the center structure to fit our needs and design. I am going to build a removable panel over these shifters. The next step in building our new floor insert involved covering it with sheet metal, making it look finished. So that's what I did. Okay, you probably know that there is not much strength in a flat piece of sheet metal, especially the bigger it gets. So, to give us some more strength, here in between these braces, you can see where I've laid out some lines where we're going to roll some beads. And we're going to do that with a bead roller. Then punch holes in the outer edge where the framework is going to meet the skin. Follow that by welding the skin to the frame. And finally, dress the weld. Oh man, that is awesome! The final step was fabricating a removable cover to give us access to the transmission and shifters. Look at this. Now, that looks like it came from the factory that way, and that is what you're after. Now, chances are you're not going to have to build a floor for a 41 Dodge, but the tools and techniques that I've shown you today, you can use on almost any project that you tackle. And it is a much better investment to buy the tools and do it yourself than to pay somebody to do it for you. Hey, if you're just getting here, today's subject is Sergeant Rock, an old 41 Dodge Power Wagon that I'm getting ready to tear into here in the next few weeks. And right now, I'm filling you in on how this all got started. Now at this point, for all you knew, I was just working on an old truck. Hadn't called it Sergeant Rock yet, hadn't told you which direction I was going to go with it, but that all changed with the introduction of some really big tires. Bigger than you can imagine. This is the biggest DOT-approved tire on the market, made specifically for light trucks. Some big axles. These are 2.5-ton Rockwell axles that came stock on big old military trucks. These are some of the biggest, baddest axles that you can put under a truck. A big legend and some big guns. Check this out, this is awesome.
It's a little something to play with.
Hell yeah. The first step was to set up those massive Rockwell axles with hydraulic steering. But not just because I wanted to, no. Once again, I've been getting a lot of questions about Rockwell axles and why and how and when to set up hydraulic steering.
I'm using nice, thick, 3/8-inch steel plate for these brackets, but that alone is not enough. So to keep these brackets from bending and flexing on me, I'm going to fabricate some gussets that I'll weld to the brackets, 2 per side, and that will give us the strength we need. Now, when you're working with thick metal, make sure that you grind a bevel into the edges where you're going to run a weld, because this will allow you to sink the weld bead down into the center of the metal and give you proper penetration. Especially important if you're using a MIG welder. And there's my mounting brackets. Now all you have to do is take the stock tie rod ends, put them into these extensions, and this axle is ready to go in the truck.
Well, that pretty much brings everybody up to date. Now, I know it's been a while since you've seen this truck, and a lot of you have been asking about it. But now, the wait is over. Yeah, the only problem that you may have now is actually believing that this is the same truck that I originally rolled in here. But it is. But don't worry, you haven't missed anything. Because next week, I'm going to tell you all about this paint, I'm going to tell you about the paint job, and then I'm going to show you how to build the biggest, the baddest, the nastiest thing you can possibly imagine. You don't want to miss it. What I've got in my hand here is the typical cam that you'd find in a V8 gasoline engine. This is a 60 series Detroit diesel engine, the type of engine you'd find in a big rig running down the road. Now, you can see there's quite a difference in the cam and the valve train. You may understand how this works, but we are going to show you how this works.
How it works is brought to you by WyoTech.
All right, Danny, we've got a big engine and big camshaft and big roller rockers, and all the viewers are going, what the heck? Let's talk them through it.
All right, what we really got here is an overhead camshaft engine. The camshaft was setting in the block in some prior engines, but now we've got it setting in the head.
And that just gets rid of a lot of rotating mass.
It really does, and maybe even a weak point with the push tubes and push rods in there, and now we're setting right up here in the top, right with our rockers and everything. So.
Okay, now most of the viewers are used to seeing roller rockers on Chevys and Fords. This is entirely different. Let's talk them through it.
What we've got here is our roller for our exhaust valves, our roller for our injector, and a roller for our intake valves.
Now your injector is a little different. What's going on here?
It's made out of a little bit different material because of the pressures that it takes to force that fuel inside that cylinder. We've made out a little bit different material so it doesn't start flaking.
Now, most viewers are used to seeing this kind of a cam lobe. You notice it comes up real smooth, goes around the top, and then gradually slopes back down. This is completely different. What's going on there?
We can say again, this is our injector roller. This is going to inject the fuel going in. You can see how quickly it ramps up.
Oh, yeah.
So what we're going to have
So
is
it's
this.
open quick.
It is. It's just going to be a real quick hit. Again, we're talking about shoving fuel in there at 25,000 pounds. It's got to come on very quickly and have a pretty hard hit.
And then that flat top will keep it open for a long period of time.
It does. It holds it down so we don't get those exhaust gases coming back up into our injector.
And it slams shut.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, this has 4 valves per cylinder, right?
Yes, it does.
Now, usually when you think of 4 valves per cylinder, you're thinking of a performance racing engine. Why a big diesel?
More efficient. I mean, we're talking about 2 intake valves, 2 exhaust valves. We're going to be able to draw in more air and again exit what we're burning there.
Okay.
More efficient.
We see the exhaust valves, we see the intake valves. What is that big boy right in the center?
This is the injector. We do have the same stroke coming from the camshaft every time, all right, which is forcing and creating the pressures to force that fuel in. And this is the actuator that actually is the timing and how much fuel is actually going to go in there.
Okay, now can you tweak these engines, tweak the computer and make them really hot?
Absolutely. We can change the parameters as far as more horsepower, the RPM, all of it. Just
Make it smoke the tires?
Absolutely.
Blow the clutch?
Exactly.
Twist the frame?
All those things.
Why don't we start this thing up? How much oil is this going to sling around?
I don't want to shower.
This starts, this runs, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Okay, well,
We don't want
where's
it
the key?
happening now.
You took the key,
I
man.
sure do, man. You're not going to have that stuff.
That's how it works. If you do any kind of off-roading at all, you probably know that airing tires up and down is not just part of the game. That's why most people want some sort of an onboard air system. But before you invest in an air tank, you need to check out the power tank from Advanced Air Systems. You fill this up with liquid CO2. Then when you open the valve, the liquid CO2 evaporates into a gas which builds pressure and comes out here at up to 200 psi. This not only gives you the power to run air tools, but you can fill up a 37-inch tall tire from 10 psi to 30 psi in 60 seconds. Yeah, that's smoking. Now add to that, you got the hoses and the hardware, and this thing is completely portable, and you might find that the power tank just might be one of the best investments you can make. Now, since we are on the subject of air tools, Matco has got the perfect companion for that power tank in this model 1769 impact wrench. Now, the cool thing about this, it's in a nice, small, compact package, so it'll fit right into your rig's toolbox, but it's also extremely powerful. This thing will knock loose a nut that is tightened to 1,000 foot-pounds in just 6 seconds. And that, my friends, is nice to have when you're changing a flat on the side of a mountain. That's going to do it for trucks. We will see you next week.